It's really worth to New Zealand. We talked to the minister who rubber-stamped the Wallabies' economic exemption. Sydney's locked down for another month. And is your car in high demand? We'll count down the top 5 most stolen vehicles. And be afraid, an Exorcist reboot is on the way. Don't forget, catch us live on Facebook.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Aotearoa tēnei. More than 15,000 bookings were made earlier today for the COVID-19 vaccine, the first day on which appointments are open to anyone over 60. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says there are now more than 800,000 bookings in the system. Amy Williams reports.
So far, just under 700,000 people have been fully vaccinated, which Ms Ardern says is a good start. Those under 60 are asked to wait until invited to book a vaccine over the coming months. But some are trying their luck. RNZ has heard from a handful of people who have walked into vaccination centres and got their first dose, despite not being in an eligible group. 1 million doses have arrived in the country this month, and another 1.5 million are due in August.
A former health minister of Fiji says the nation's health system has collapsed under the pressure of the COVID-19 pandemic. With hundreds of new cases being reported every day and the death toll steadily mounting, Neil Sharma says the situation is disconcerting and depressing.
Healthcare workers need to consider being vaccinated if they're going to deal with the community and, be able to function fully. When you have a huge volume of infection in the community, and you're exposed to it, then you're definitely taking a risk to yourself and to your near and dear.
Fiji now has more than 18,500 active cases in isolation, and 204 people have died from the coronavirus since April. More free syringes for drug users and a registry are part of a new government plan to eliminate hepatitis C by 2030. The Associate Minister of Health, Aisha Verrill, says about 45,000 New Zealanders have the disease, but only about half of them know it. She says symptoms often don't appear until after the damage has been done. Hepatitis C is the leading cause of liver transplants and the second leading cause of liver cancer, but Dr Verrill says it's both preventable and curable. Implementing the plan is estimated to cost just over $2 million on top of $7 million already spent each year on assessment and treatment. Dunedin's mayor says the investigation into temporarily elevated lead levels in drinking water in East Otago looked at all possible causes. The City Council has today lifted the do not drink notice in Waikoaiti, Karitane and Hawkesbury Village almost 6 months after it was imposed. Residents were told on February the 2nd not to drink the water or use it for food preparation. Aaron Hawkins says no definitive cause has been found, but the lead is likely to have come from pipes and fittings on private properties.
We did more than 2,000 tests to identify if and where lead was present. We were given many suggestions from within the community about where this may have been coming from in terms of getting into the raw water supply, and all of those things needed to be investigated thoroughly.
A highly anticipated new vision for Milford Sound is being called a game changer for Te Anau. The Milford Opportunities Plan includes recommendations for charging international visitors an access fee, banning cruise ships from entering the Sound, and creating a zero-carbon park and ride system. It envisages Te Anau becoming a hub with a new visitor centre. Chris Adams from Fiordland Jet says the ambitious project could make a real difference to the region.
It's a very bold plan and big change is going to be made. I'm wishing them well. Just hope that they support the little operators and it doesn't become one or two big operators are all that is left in Milford Sound. But for Te Anau, it could be a game changer.
The number of visitors to Piopiotahi more than doubled in the 6 years to 2019. It's 4 minutes past 5. New Zealand are guaranteed a third Olympic medal now that the All Black Sevens have qualified for tonight's final against defending champions Fiji. They comfortably beat Great Britain 29-7 in the first semi-final this afternoon. Fiji then beat Argentina 26-14. The final kicks off at 9 o'clock in Tokyo. Earlier, rowers Brooke Brooke Donoghue and Hannah Osborne won silver in the double scull, finishing second to Romania. Donoghue told Sky she was struggling to comprehend what they've achieved.
I'm pretty overwhelmed. I'm just incredibly proud of us, and I think we had an awesome race, and we absolutely did our best, and I'm stoked to walk away with the medal.
New Zealand rugby fans are set to miss out on at least 2 but possibly 4 home tests this year because of the Trans-Tasman bubble pause. The All Blacks are due to play 2 Bledisloe Cup and 4 Rugby Championship games in New Zealand, but RNZ understands the 2 tests against Argentina in Auckland and Wellington in September will be moved to Australia. The 2 against South Africa, set for Dunedin and Auckland, are also under threat. New Zealand Rugby Chief Executive Mark Robinson says neither the All Blacks nor South Africa will be able to go through MIQ in September, so if the bubble pause is extended beyond 8 weeks, the tests against the Springboks will have to be played in Australia. It's also likely the second Bledisloe Cup test will be moved from Wellington to Auckland. That's the news.
Doing what Australia won't. We've been left to pick up the pieces after Australia basically poked us in the eye. So who deserves citizenship? It is important to have the debate and not shut down debate just because it's uncomfortable. And should the Wallabies come here? Well, they can't really say otherwise when they let the Wiggles in, can they?
Hot Potato. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
Now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. For Northland, scattered showers, easing for a time tonight and tomorrow morning. Auckland to Kapiti Coast, including Coromandel Peninsula and Central High Country, mainly fine, isolated showers in the west. Bay of Plenty, Gisborne to Wellington and Wairarapa, fine, some cloudy periods. Nelson and Marlborough, excluding the Kaikoura Coast, mainly fine, cloud and a few showers tomorrow evening. For the Kaikoura Coast and Canterbury, fine, some cloudy periods. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, cloudy periods and a few showers. Otago and Southland, fine with the odd afternoon shower today, high cloud tomorrow. Chatham Islands, cloudy with occasional showers. RNZ National, it's coming up to 7 minutes past 5.
Kia ora rā, e ho tēnā koutou katoa, nau mai, haere mai, ki checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Tonight, New Zealand scores its second medal, this time silver in the rowing, and the men's sevens are in the hunt for gold. We'll have all the Olympic news shortly. But first, the government fails to deliver any evidence so a Wallabies test will bring in the $20 million in economic gains it's touting, with the minister conceding it's a political decision. Aisha Verrill granted the Australian team an economic exemption to travel here for the Bledisloe Cup, despite the freeze on the quarantine-free travel with Australia. The team that's been operating in a bubble won't have to isolate, and it will arrive here by charter on Friday morning. The government claims a single test match is worth between $17 and $20 million in spending for the host region. But the decision has angered some exporters who are struggling to get in and out of the country to do business because of those same border restrictions and the squeeze on MIQ. The Acting Minister for COVID-19 response, Aisha Verrill, explains the value of the game.
There is clearly an economic benefit to having the Bledisloe Cup played. I think it was estimated at over $20 million. And in addition, I'd note that the exemption is because these are not New Zealand citizens, but they're not coming back on flights that are that New Zealanders would otherwise be on. They're on a charter flight.
It is classified as an economic exemption. That's what the government's calling it. And when you talk about the value that this will have, the government is saying a test match is estimated to be worth between $17 to $20 million. So what proof did you require of that economic value?
Well, to be honest, Lisa, I got the advice of officials on that, but I think that seems like a very plausible estimate. But I think if you look across the
So
arrangement...
which officials, Minister, I'm sorry to interrupt, but which officials gave you that advice and what number did they nominate?
I got advice from the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet on that, as well as advice from health officials.
I'm looking at figures in front of me now from the Auckland Council, which say the 2020 All Blacks versus Australia game brought to the region $938,000, give or take a few dollars. Dunedin has told us that the most that they have made from a test in the region is up to $10 million. So what proof did you require of the value that this would bring?
Look, Lisa, those are fair enough questions, and we may, I may well need to go and have another look at that. But I don't think it's unplausible, the estimate that we've been supplied with.
It's a pretty serious decision to make, though, Minister, isn't it? And here's the thing. We've talked to some businesses who are unhappy around a lack of transparency, and they're not sure what benchmark they need to reach in order to get an exemption. So can you explain the criteria to them as you applied it to the Wallabies in terms of the economic exemption so that they too can have a fair crack at it?
Look, it is pretty tough to be able to provide criteria when a lot of these opportunities are time limited. So clearly it's not like I'm looking at a list of other businesses that may be able to bring people in exactly the same time. To be honest, we looked at that as an individual case.
The reality is, though, Minister, this is entirely at your discretion, isn't it? So it's a political decision, isn't it?
It is, but I want to be clear that I took into account the health criteria, health and potential health impacts of people coming into New Zealand by this arrangement.
Understand that regarding the health criteria, but this is an economic exemption as stated by the government.
Yeah.
And you're saying that you took someone's reckons on what it would be worth.
They're official reckons, and so they are based on officials taking a diligent look at the data. But look, if there are concerns that they think that members of the public think our estimates are incorrect, I'd happily have another look at that. But we have granted the exemption for the Bledisloe Cup match to go ahead.
How do you explain that huge disparity? 938,000 Auckland says from one test match, and you're using a figure of 20 million.
You also said a figure of 10 million, which is much closer up to 10 million, which is in the ballpark of that. So, look, I think you've got every right to question that figure, and we can go and have another look at that if you like.
Did you require a certain number of matches be played here in order to meet the benchmark for economic gains?
No, so the other tests are to be determined.
So the reality is we could end up with just one test?
And this exemption has been granted for the first test to be played.
And how many people are covered by the exemption?
So it is approximately 60.
Okay. So the border order and issuing an exemption, the order requires you to consult with the Prime Minister, the Sports Minister and other ministers before you make this decision. Did anyone in that group think this was a bad idea?
I didn't receive any other feedback, no.
Did you consult with them?
Yes, yeah.
And none of them provided any feedback?
None of them provided me the feedback that you suggested No, I haven't had any other colleagues say that we shouldn't go ahead with this.
So the Prime Minister agreed this was a good thing to do, and the Deputy Prime Minister, who is also the Minister of Sport?
Well, we made the decision following those rules, yes.
Okay. So how were you able to turn this decision around in less than 3 working days compared to some of the waits that businesses and individuals face when waiting for their exemptions to be considered?
So officials worked very hard to bring the necessary information together in that time.
And is it not possible to work really hard to bring information together to make decisions for the business community and other individuals?
I mean, I think if you look at the range of exemptions we've provided to range of efforts were made to make sure that we bring workers in through managed isolation and quarantine, for example, RSE workers or mariners where they're needed by the fishing industry. We are making efforts to make sure that other industries can have their needs met as well.
Minister, I suppose it comes down to this. Is New Zealand Rugby and the Wallabies getting special treatment?
Look, I think the really key thing about these exemptions is I don't sit there with a list of businesses that I'm deciding between because they are time limited, and therefore my choice was not the Wallabies versus someone else. My choice was the Wallabies or no one, and remember they're coming in their own plane. So that was the decision I was faced with in this instance.
But can you see how some people might look at this and think it's not that transparent, where you cannot lay out a specific criteria for an economic exemption that you can benchmark against other cases?
Look, I think that is fair, that we could, that we make sure that we take efforts to be clear about criteria for getting exemptions. That's a fair point. But I just point to that there's a number of ways in which we're supporting industry to move people across the border safely, and a number of industries are being helped in that respect.
And that was the Acting Minister for COVID-19 Response, Aisha Verrill. It is almost 16 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. The Aussie team arrives by charter on Friday morning. The details of the test series and what's being played where are yet to be ironed out. But with the Pumas and Springboks due here later in the year, it's complicated. Ko taku manuhiri inaene ko Mark Robinson. Mark is the boss of New Zealand Rugby and he joins me now. Kia ora, Mark. What was the economic case put to the government for getting the Wallabies here?
Kia ora, Lisa. Well, we, I guess, have been in regular contact, as a whole lot of other different organisations and sectors have been for some time now. So we were able to have a conversation about the fact of the importance of these games, not only the economic importance, but certainly the fact that live sport in our country is vitally important as well. And so, thankfully we've had the opportunity to bring the Australians in.
So, Mark, just to be clear, you say you were able to have a conversation. Did you present any proof of the economic value to the government?
Oh, look, we have been, like, as I say, a lot of other agencies and organisations in regular dialogue with the government now for 14 or 15 months about a whole lot of things about the game, one of which is economic impact. And we spent a bit of time last year throughout the Rugby Championship, probably about a year ago actually, with that. So there's a general acceptance of what the benefits to live sport and international sport are to New Zealand.
So, Mark, the government is using a figure saying that one test match brings into the host region up to $20 million, between $17 and $20 million. Where did that figure come from? Did you provide it?
Well, there's been years of, like I say, going back to if you go back to the work that was done around the 2011 World Cup, there's been modelling around the economic impact of major events.
But these are COVID times, aren't they, Mark? And I'm sorry to interrupt, but you're not going to have an international audience because the border is closed, right? Auckland Council has provided figures that say the All Blacks versus Australia game in 2020 brought in 938,000 into the region. Dunedin says basically the best that they've done from an All Blacks test at Forsyth Bar is up to 20 million. So that's half of the scenario that the government is reflecting in its figures. And I'm just wondering where those numbers have come from.
Well, look, we've, as I was trying to say before, Lisa, we've done regular work right across many, many years, providing indications of what the economic impact could look like right across a whole range of different activities associated with international sport, be that, retail, hospitality, accommodation, all sorts of things. And we've sold out test matches at the likes of Eden Park with, approximately 45,000 people at over several days of activity. That's the kind of scale we're talking about, obviously. So I'm not aware of the exact. I haven't heard the comments from the government, whether it was today or recently about that. But the sharing of information is not rugby's alone in terms of what the economic impact of major events is, and be that concerts or any other kind of sporting events. That's quite consistent and regular.
Is New Zealand guaranteed more than one game on home turf?
Oh, look, we're working through that at the moment. So, we've as we've said, we would like to think that the test match on the 7th is locked in. Beyond that, there's a whole lot of different contingencies. All those words that come flooding back from last year, Lisa, around contingency, different scenarios we're looking at are really live at the moment. So.
But in terms of economic benefits, you can't even guarantee us more than one test match.
Oh, look, we are working on that basis at the moment, that we will have the opportunity to stage another game, but we do need to keep working on that with all the organisations associated with it, both locally, domestically, and Rugby Australia and SANZAAR. So. There's obviously scenarios around the next few weeks, and then there's scenarios at the back end of October and back end of September and early October around the games that might be able to play here. So we just have to keep working through that.
Right. So if you head off to Perth, right, near the end of August, is your intention to stay there until the freeze comes off the bubble?
Look, again, we are not in a situation to know exactly how this might play out. Logically, at the moment, it would follow that once we're in Australia, we'll be there for a period. How long that is, we simply don't know at the moment.
Is it likely, or could it be, the scenario that you go on to the game in Washington from Australia?
Look, that would be, a really challenging scenario for the team and everyone associated with, our organisation. It's not something we're considering at the moment. But, as I said earlier, there'll be a lot of things will come clearer once we understand what will happen at the end of September, start of October, and we'll be in a better position to comment then.
Right. So is it potentially the situation that you may require managed isolation and quarantine 2 times before Christmas for your squad?
Oh, look, we've worked on the basis in, throughout COVID that teams in various environments wouldn't be required to do that twice. So we haven't revisited that. More recently with the team, we're really focused around what's going to happen in over the next couple of weeks, essentially, and that's all we've been zeroed in at this time.
Okay, so it is your intention to go to America, right, where there are huge rates of COVID at the moment and transmission. How many of your players are vaccinated?
Look, none as yet, but we've got plans that we're taking...
None? Not a single one has been vaccinated, Mark?
If you could let me finish, Lisa. That'll be happening at the end of this week. So we've just been approved to have the early vaccination framework allowed off the team, and so that'll happen in the next couple of days. And then we'll be in a situation, I guess, once fully vaccinated, we'll obviously consider those questions closer to the time. But if we are able to get back in New Zealand, if the bubble pause happens as it's been expected to at the moment, and we're back in New Zealand for a period of those last 2 games, and if there then is some downtime after those games, then the possibility of going on the end of the year tour is still very real. But we're going down a track of a whole lot of ifs and buts here, which frankly at the moment we really don't know if they're going to play out or not. So
they'll be offered the vaccination at the end of the week. What are your players telling you about whether they're going to take it up or not?
Oh, at this stage, I mean, I'm not close enough to the individual players, but I sense from conversations I've had with management that there's acceptance of that.
So you're looking to go, obviously, on the Northern Hemisphere tour. League pulled out of the World Cup in the UK because of the risk there, right? They considered the risk to be too high. Will you leave behind unvaccinated players as you head over to the UK?
Look, we're in regular contact with the Northern Hemisphere unions that will propose to visit all the time. So we'll be taking guidance on that as well as our own medical experts. Really consistently right the way through the next few weeks. And as the time comes nearer around making the call on travelling or not, things will become apparent, won't they? But at the moment, it's simply too hard to know exactly what might be happening.
So as an employer, though, will players need to be vaccinated in order to go on tour overseas with you?
Yes, they will. That is our policy.
And they'll be left behind if they're not vaccinated?
That is our policy at New Zealand Rugby, that they have to be vaccinated to travel and tour.
Appreciate your time, Mark. That is Mark Robinson, who's the boss of New Zealand Rugby. Homai o whakaaro, would love to know your thoughts on this. Nō reira anei nā kaupapa mō te hōtaka nei. You would have heard the Minister talking about the criteria or lack of it to make a decision on giving an economic exemption to the Wallabies. What do you make about that? Seems to be a discretionary matter. Is it transparent and fair? Pātui mai, text me 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. A far north man has taken to using poison-soaked tampons to kill feral dogs which are roaming the area and devastating local farms and wildlife. Around 40 people turned up for a community meeting in Hohora today to find a solution to the wild dogs who have killed more than 150 sheep and goats. Locals fear a child could be injured or worse and desperately want government help. Nita Blake-Person reports from the far north.
It's been an awful and exhausting few months for Anne-Marie Nilsson. Packs of feral dogs prey on her farm night after night.
So at the moment we've had 5 nights without a dog on the scene, which for us has been really great. But I was actually talking to the neighbour yesterday and the dogs have just gone to his place.
The Nilsson's place sits just below Cape Reinga. There's estimated to be around 100 wild dogs in the wider area.
Well, they've killed around about 150 head of our animals. That's goats and sheep and lambs. But, you know, the mental toll, I think, on ourselves has been probably just as bad with cleaning up and no sleep.
So far, calls for help from the authorities, local councils, the Department of Conservation, have been fruitless. Today, locals turned up to a busy community meeting to front foot the issue, but again, solutions felt hard to come by.
Council and DOC and that are going to do all. It's up to the locals. Simple as that.
Mark Thompson collects mussel spat on 90 Mile Beach and had a close call with the dogs last week.
The dogs ripped away and up over the dune when they saw me. I stopped, went back, hopped out and thought, oh yeah, went over the dune, nah, they're gone. And within 2 minutes they were coming out of the scrub at me. And we just shot them before they got me. You knew it was either me or the dog.
The agencies that fronted today want the dogs gone too, and there were plenty of ideas floated. Talk of helicopters, police and defence force training exercise, a push for more guns and poison. Local dog rangers had their firearms taken off them 5 years ago. Right now they can only track and trap the dogs. Far North District Councillor Matty Radish says that's got to change.
There's 2 solutions, either poison the dogs or send up the dog rangers, that belong to the Far North District Council and get rid of them. I can't see any other way. It's actually a Far North District Council problem.
Department of Conservation representative Abraham Witana says their hands are somewhat tied in dealing with the dogs. He says there's no registered poison for them to use.
In terms of shooting, we do have the potential to destroy dogs if they are found to have wildlife in their possession, in their mouth at the time, and by that time it's usually after the fact.
Frustrated by all the talk, one man offered this solution with a poison purchased at Repco.
Can you tell people what that thing is? It's a tampon, mate. It's a tampon, right? I loaded it with my jungle juice over there in the jar, and it's still doing its work.
Those tampons are soaked in the poison and meat, and apparently the string eventually gets wolfed down by the dog before it's all over Red Rover. While not everyone was on board, including a warning from an SPCA representative to not go rogue, some agreed the end justified the means. Local Edward Neho says a better option would be poisons used in Australia to deal with dingoes.
They're feral dogs, and until they become classified as pest animals, I guess, is what DOC and Council were saying, their hands are tied.
For Anne-Marie Nilsson, the solution is simple, and she wants the government to get onto it.
We need to change the legislation so that we can differentiate between a domestic dog and a feral dog, and we need to be able to deal with feral dogs in an appropriate manner.
With fears the dog's prey will shift from stock to humans as summer rolls around, it's a law change that Nilsson says can't come soon enough.
The New Zealand contingent has a brand new silver medal to bring home from Tokyo. Hannah Osborne and Brooke Donoghue snaffled a silver in the women's double sculls a few hours ago, and they join me now. Hannah, I think, is first on the line. Kia ora, Hannah. Tell me about the thrill of that.
Hi, I am absolutely over the moon. It was an absolute whirlwind of a race, and it just feels a little bit like very surreal at the moment. But I'm so stoked with how we went.
Are you still buzzing?
Yeah, honestly, I don't think I'll wear off for a very long time.
We were all glued to the television watching you, right? And it looked like, man, you really had to pull the hammer down at the end trying to chase the leaders there. Can you just talk me through what that's like? I mean, it must be one hell of a burn.
Well, to be honest, Brooke's the one who's in bow that's just telling me what to do. I'm just in the front, just keeping the rate up and keeping the rhythm going. So it definitely was a burn coming into that last sort of 500, but we definitely are prepared for it.
Have you had a chance to talk to the family back home?
I had a brief conversation with my partner and the family that was with him at the time, but to be honest, it's been pretty much go since we finished, so I'll be talking to them fairly soon.
And how are you going to celebrate? Because it's a bit of a strange situation over there, as we all know.
Well, there's some pizzas down in the village dining hall, so I think I was saying to Brooke that we'll both have one each to celebrate, I think.
Is that the post-win reward? Because didn't Hayden Wild have a pizza as well?
Oh, I'm sure he did. It's very good. It's top-notch, I'm telling you.
Oh, fantastic. Hey, and are you still wearing the medal?
Yeah, it's still on. I won't be taking off for a little bit.
I bet. Is Brooke there with you?
Yeah, I'll pass you on to her now.
Oh, thank you, Hannah, and congratulations. Fantastic job.
Thank you. Hello.
Kia ora, Brooke, silver medalist. How does that sound to you?
Yeah, pretty bloody good.
I bet. So tell us about it.
It's been a bit of a whirlwind since we finished the race now, but Hannah and I put it all out there and had a really good race. We've got no regrets, and now we're just sort of soaking it up.
Hey, have you managed to talk to your parents? We did actually. Your dad was having a good old cry when you went over the line.
Oh, that's so sweet. Yeah, I have talked to them, and they managed to hold off the tears for a second to say hello and congratulations.
Yeah, what did they say to you, Brooke?
They were just really proud of me. I think it was nice just to check in with them, especially they would have loved to have been here, but technology's great. It was awesome that they could be at the cloud and watch it with all the friends and family there.
Yeah, is it a bit bittersweet that you couldn't have them around you?
I think given the circumstances of the world, we're just really grateful and lucky to have been able to get here and to race, and I think there's going to be plenty of time to celebrate once we get home.
When you were on the podium, can you just talk us through what was going through your head in that moment, special moment?
Again, I was just really proud of Hannah and I. It was amazing to have her standing there with me. To see the Romanians in the gold medal spot, they're someone who we've been watching over the past couple of years, and they're just been incredible athletes and put out a really good performance. I think for us, I could stand there proud knowing I'd given it my all.
Hey, will you both go and watch the girls in the pairs tomorrow?
Yeah, definitely. I think we're going to try and get out and watch all the rest of the racing. I think there's some really good things to come, especially with all the other sports that their finals are coming up to.
Fantastic job, and congratulations to both of you. Absolutely fantastic. That is Brooke Donoghue and Hannah Osborne, who are the winners of New Zealand's latest medal, and it was a silver. And also, obviously, the Sevens are in the hunt potentially for gold. Right, I think the headlines are up next. E te iwi e haere aki nei I a checkpoint. Sydney's banged up for at least another 4 weeks with 177 COVID cases today. Fiji's health system has collapsed under the weight of the virus, according to a former minister. And rents in Aotearoa, Christchurch are rising, and so is the number of people living in cars and garages. And hold on to your nerves, an old school horror is making a comeback. Homai o whakaaro, we'd love your feedback about anything you've heard on the program this evening. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can email us. The address there is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. And here's Susanna with the headlines.
Kia ora, Lisa. People aged under 60 are being asked to remain patient after the COVID vaccination program entered its final stage earlier today. Under the phased rollout in Group 4, anyone aged over 60 is now eligible to make an appointment. More than 15,000 bookings have been made today. The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says there are now more than 800,000 bookings in the system. Just under 700,000 people have been fully vaccinated. The government says it may look again at the economic value of allowing the Australian rugby team to enter the country. The Trans-Tasman travel bubble is closed to anyone but returning New Zealanders. The Wallabies, however, have been granted an economic exemption and are arriving on Friday on a charter flight. The Acting Minister for COVID-19 response, Aisha Verrill, told Checkpoint there was always variance in economic estimates, but she says the estimate of $17 to $20 million of economic activity was not implausible. Dr Aisha Verrill says the projections came from the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet. Dunedin's Mayor says no definitive cause has been found into the temporarily elevated lead levels in drinking water in East Otago. The City Council has today lifted the do not drink notice almost 6 months after it was imposed. Aaron Hawkins says the lead is likely to have come from pipes and fittings on private properties. A highly anticipated new vision for Milford Sound is being called a game changer for Te Anau. The Milford Opportunities Master Plan includes recommendations for international visitors to pay to access the iconic destination and a zero carbon park and ride system. New Zealand are guaranteed a third Olympic medal now that the Rugby Sevens have qualified for tonight's final against defending champions Fiji. The final kicks off at 9 o'clock in Tokyo. Earlier, rowers Brooke Donoghue and Hannah Osborne won silver in the double scull, finishing second to Romania. Those are the latest news headlines on RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Nā mihi Susana, no mai hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Ko taku hoa I nai nei, ko Nicholas Poynton, who joins me in the studio to talk business. Okay, let's talk about this region that sees the first decline in property values in a year. Which one is it? Drum roll.
Yeah, this is the Marlborough region. We talk about the most expensive houses in the Marlborough market. It remains to be seen, though, if this is part of a wider trend we're seeing in the property market or a case of what property economists and pundits call your standard winter wobbles that you see when it comes to sales activity. Because QV, that's the state-owned property valuer, they've released their latest property market report for the 3 months to June, and it shows that the rate of growth for the most expensive and for the cheapest houses have slowed. They've fallen to about 1.8%, so that means values increased over that three-month period by an average of 6.6%. That's down from an average 3-month rate of growth of about 8.4%. And there's a couple of factors that have been sort of pointed to as sort of contributing to this bit of an easing that we're seeing in the property market at the moment. One is just the tightening of lending restrictions we've seen to property investors. They now have to have a 40% deposit to get a mortgage from a bank.
You're still talking about 8.4% growth, aren't you?
Yeah, it's now at 6.6% growth. So it's the rate of growth is slowing. So that's sort of maybe, the market is cooling, but is this just sort of your standard winter wobbles? Part of the reasons that have been thrown out is that, you're seeing fewer property investors getting into the market. There's also the likelihood that interest rates will go up, which will make sort of managing or servicing a mortgage much more expensive. You've also just got the general unaffordability of houses, which has seen fewer people partake in the market, and as I mentioned, that winter, that seasonal element, for whatever reason, just cold weather, apparently that doesn't make the best conditions when you're trying to sell a house. But one of the more interesting parts of this report is, as we sort of mentioned before, was that the most expensive houses in the Marlborough region, they declined in value by 0.1%. And QV, by its own admission, says that that is immaterial, but the only reason why they've decided to highlight this and say that there's any real significance behind it is that it's the first time in 12 months that property values have fallen. And QV, they're not necessarily ones to do forecasts, but they say that we could expect to see similar drops in the Napier and Queenstown region, where the rate of price growth has largely been stagnant or flat over the past few months. They do say, though, it is just far too early to say if the market is now on the verge of a turning point. We won't really have a clear idea until we get to spring to see if these various sort of policies and changes that have been enacted over the past 6 months, if they are having a serious effect.
Okay, let's move on to Z Energy, right? So this company, you're telling me, isn't planning to kind of race to a low-carbon future. What's the deal there?
Yeah, it's an interesting view for a company that most people would expect to be one of the most exposed to the effects of climate change and the transition away to fossil fuels. But at its investor seminar today, they say they expect the demand for fuel, for petrol and diesel, to remain for some time to come. They sort of they agree with the Climate Change Commission. They say that it is necessary to take action on decarbonising the economy now, but they expect that the demand for petrol will remain strong for quite some time. They say part of that is they think that the uptake of EVs will be slow, but also if you look at the logistics sector, heavy freight, there's going to be the need for trucks powered by diesel for quite some time because there isn't an electric or a low emissions equivalent on the market. And they say that they do keep their options open. They say they have the ability to be flexible. They say, as more and more EVs come to the market, they're ready to sort of install more charging stations. If hydrogen fuel, if that becomes a thing, they'll be ready to sort of implement that infrastructure within its service stations. And speaking of its service stations, this was probably the most interesting part of this seminar, that they say they want to be seen less as a fuel retailer and more as a convenience retailer, because they say they own so many service stations, they have so much in common with convenience stores. They think there's actually real potential there for this company. They hope that part of its business will make up for about $500 million worth of sales by 2026. And given that they own so many of these properties around the country, don't quote me on this, I think they are the biggest fuel retailer. They actually plan to sort of put all its retail sites into a separate real estate investment entity and list that on the stock exchange. This is one of the many options this company is sort of exploring as it looks to adapt to these challenges that faces its business.
Nicholas, let's make like Olympic rowers and whiz through the markets.
The NZX is up 5 points to 12,595. The dollar is at 69.6 US cents and 95.6 Australian.
Ngā mihi. Thanks, Nicholas. The number of people living in cars and garages is on the rise in Christchurch as many struggle to keep up with spiralling rents. It's happening as temperatures plummet below zero, leading to concerns for people's welfare. Conan Young reports.
I find Rexine Tihema sitting outside a dairy in the suburb of Linwood on a cold and wet Ōtautahi day. Now 42, she's been on and off the streets since she was a teenager. When I ask where she's sleeping at the moment, she points to a spot over the road next to an empty building.
I've slept in over there I've made sheets up and made homemade tents over there, and I've had the cold off my head.
On those clear, still winter nights when temperatures plummet to -4, she tries to find space on a couch at a friend's place, but it doesn't always work.
A lot of people think, what a life, but it's me living this life. I don't like living it. I know I can do better, but I just need a home.
Rexine Tihema says the hardest thing about living on the streets is how lonely you end up feeling.
The street life, sometimes it pushes you to suicide, and that's what we don't want. Now, I've met one of the boys just the other day, and he told me he wanted to kill himself. And I said to him, son, don't you think like that. Don't give up. All you need to do is look for the right groups that love and care about you. And once I said that, now he's walking around and he comes to look for me all the time now.
We need some more soup. I meet City Missioner Matthew Mark in the charity's car park, where volunteers are busy making up food parcels. He says there's been a drop in the number of people in Rexine's position living on the streets. More of a worry these days are the so-called hidden homeless, those living in cars, garages or on a friend's couch. He says they've seen a 13% increase this month compared to last, and people coming to them for help who are in that situation, and rising rents are to blame.
In order for a family to be in poverty, their earnings $33,000 or less for almost everywhere around our country at the moment, rent would soak that up, full stop.
And they're the people who end up in garages?
They're the people who end up in garages or sleeping on couches or in their cars.
They're starting to see results from a new approach where they work on the underlying issues that might be leading to a person's homelessness. He mentions their success in helping one man give up the booze.
Last week he had an interview with a government organisation and secured a job, and he started with them on Tuesday. And so he's since moved into our transitional housing, and later on next week is going to be moving into his own place out in the community.
Tina Doherty, who spent 2 years on the streets when she was 15, has devoted her life to helping the homeless in Aotearoa, calling many of them friends. She's been involved in serving up hot meals and hugs every Tuesday in the centre of the city.
This time of year, it's extremely tough, and this is where they get sick, and people will drive past and go, well, I only saw 2 homeless people, but they're the ones you see, the ones that are in the sheds, the abandoned buildings, on the couch, in a car. Those are the ones that you don't see.
She says for many, the streets provide a feeling of freedom and warns there's no quick fix for the issues that lead them there.
But you're dealing with mental health as well. You're dealing with addiction, drugs and alcohol, and a lot of them use drugs as their antidepressant, as their painkiller. It's a long day out there, no food and in the cold. So you need something to ease that.
Back in Linwood, Rexine is continuing to push work and income to find her some emergency housing. One day, she hopes to take a music course at Polytech and be reunited with her children.
Fiji's former health minister says the nation's health system has collapsed under the pressure of the pandemic. There have been 715 new cases in the last 24 hours and 11 people have died from COVID-19 this week. RNZ Pacific reporter Alicia Foon has more.
Pressure is mounting on frontline workers amid Fiji's health crisis. The nation now facing more than 18,500 active cases and more than 200 deaths. Fiji's former health minister Dr. Neil Sharma says the bulk of people are dying at home.
It is very disconcerting and in fact downright depressing. 2 of my patients who I attended to passed away in the last 72 hours. The mortuaries are full. We run out of body bags. The doctors and nurses are exhausted, and there's great concern within the profession that they're not being cared for. Our healthcare systems literally collapsed, I think.
An unvaccinated health worker is among the 11 people who have died this week. Dr. Sharma says it's crucial all health workers consider getting vaccinated and understand the risks if they don't.
Healthcare workers need to consider being vaccinated if they're going to deal with the community and, be able to function fully. When you have a huge volume of infection in the community and you're exposed to it, then you're definitely taking a risk to yourself and to your near and dear.
Meanwhile, UNICEF's Pacific representative Sheldon Yeat has been providing support to the Fijian government. He says it's important people don't overwhelm the health system and stay home if they're symptomatic.
No, I don't think it's collapsed, but I think it's certainly under stress, as it is, again, around the world. It impacts every component of the health system itself. There are limited numbers of trained staff, limited facilities, limited ICU facilities here.
Although misinformation is still an issue among some villages, the message is getting through for the majority. Rules like no jab, no job are having an impact. And now some schools are telling Year 13 students they need to be vaccinated to complete their education. Joni, a resident in Fiji's Western District, says his village has been provided with some good advice on how to stay protected.
I'm feeling safe at the moment, and we've been advised by our village head to be aware of social gathering. Everyone has to have a bottle of sanitizers with a mask on whenever you move around in the village.
He earns $5.50 an hour at a hotel on the island which caters for tourists. He's working 21 days in a row to help put food on the table for his family and some of his neighbours.
Most of the villages here, they can't even afford to get a phone. I just came back from town. I bought lots and lots of vegetables. Bundle of cabbage, I put one aside for me, one for another family, one for another family, one for another family, with 4 tomatoes to go with that cabbage, 1 packet noodles, with whatever little things you have. Try and share. Think of other families.
He says the only way people can cope is by communities supporting one another.
The New Zealand Olympic team now has a silver tohutoa hirawa and a bronze medal tohutoa rauwhero, and in a few hours they get the chance to complete the set with a gold. New Zealand will face Fiji in the men's Rugby Sevens final at 9 o'clock tonight. Ko taku hoa I nei ko Clay Wilson. Now Clay is outside Tokyo Stadium and joins me now. Clay, we're just a few hours away from a big moment for this New Zealand men's side, aren't we?
Kia ora, Lisa, that's right. Yes, 9 o'clock New Zealand time is the time to look out for tonight. We're inside Tokyo Stadium. For those of you watching, will see behind me is where New Zealand will face this very powerful Fijian side in the men's sevens final. Now, a huge chance for redemption for this New Zealand men's side after they didn't deliver at the Rio 2016 Games. Funnily enough, falling to Fiji in the quarterfinals of that tournament, finishing out of the medals in 5th. Now, this final tonight was set up by semi-finals earlier today where New Zealand played Great Britain and ended up just being too classy. The match was locked at 7-all late in the first half, but a pair of tries either side of half-time gave New Zealand the buffer they needed to pull away and book their spot in this final. Now, we spoke to both head coach Clark Laidlaw and co-captain Scott Curry immediately after that game, and both mentioned how there was a very relaxed atmosphere in the New Zealand dressing room before this morning's semi-final. Clark Laidlaw said that the dressing room was so relaxed, a lot of music playing, some dance music, some old school music, even a bit of country there, Lisa, they were listening to, and when he saw that, he knew the team were in for a good performance. Scott Curry mentioned he saw the same, and listen to this, he added that the team, because they had 6 hours between the semi-final and the final tonight, they were going to go back, get cool, and take a little afternoon nap before what is the biggest match of their lives.
A little bit of a moy and some country music to get you revved up. Fantastic. But the thing is here, Clay, the Fijians are going to have a lot of motivation too to get a gold, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Fiji, of course, won the gold at Rio in 2016, but they've got very strong motivation to go back-to-back here in Tokyo. Fiji, of course, continues to really struggle with COVID-19, and we saw recently when the Fijian 15 side, played the All Blacks, what it meant to that country. But you have to remember, sevens is the national sport in Fiji. If they were to get up here tonight and win back-to-back golds, that would be a great bit of positive news for a country that's really still battling the pandemic. They, like New Zealand, were unbeaten on their path to this final. They beat Japan, Canada and Great Britain in pool play, were too good for Australia in the quarterfinals, but actually in their semi-final earlier today, they were really pushed by Argentina, down 14-12 at half-time before turning on the class in the second half. What that does show, though, that first half and how Argentina were able to push Fiji is that despite how big, fast and powerful this Fijian side are, they're certainly beatable, and the New Zealand side they're going up against tonight certainly believes that they can do that and take away this gold medal.
Thanks, Clay. Good to talk to you. That was called Clay Wilson, Te Rā no Tokyo. Clay Wilson live from Tokyo tonight. It is 9 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. He muriaki I ngā pita pita kōrero after the news at 6, the cars that are on the top of the pinch list. Iwi and Hapu are worried they are under-resourced to meet growing demands from schools. With New Zealand history about to become compulsory in schools, as well as efforts to entrench te reo, tikanga and undo racism, iwi are being called upon more and more to help. They welcome the changes but warn they may struggle to cope. Here's Māori News reporter Jamie Tahana with the latest in our series on the work being done to incorporate reo Māori me ona tikanga in the classroom.
Ngāti Naho is nestled in northern Waikato. Its rohe includes Rangiriri, the site of one of the most significant battles of the New Zealand Wars. The chief executive of Ngāti Naho Kaitiaki, Brad Totorewa, says they're finding themselves busier and busier.
There is a lot of demand, and there is a requirement from schools, as you know, agents of the Crown, treaty partnerships and all that type of carry on, to work with iwi, mana whenua.
He welcomes that. Rangiriri is a site the Crown tried to forget. For a century, the scene of significant bloodshed was turned into farmland and carved out by a motorway. Now, more and more people are wanting to learn what happened. And that's about to increase when history becomes compulsory in schools next year. Iwi and hapu are also being increasingly called upon to help teach tikanga and get involved in work to curb racism in the education sector. That's a lot of work for small organisations, and Brad Aotearoa says it could become burdensome.
But the problem is that resourcing doesn't come with the demand. So schools are forced to a certain degree to try and engage the special knowledge that our people have, but aren't able to resource it. And I'm talking about fund it.
Some larger iwi are well equipped, but others, particularly small ones or those yet to reach settlement, are not. Ngāti Toa says it already has well-established relationships with schools around Porirua. Its education coordinator, Bianca Elkington, says the changes are exciting, but schools are wanting a lot of help from local iwi.
Absolutely, we should be participating in that space. Because schools are really cognizant of the fact that they don't want to move without iwi in anything. Like, hey, we're looking at New Zealand history in schools. Can't do that without iwi. So back they come.
Bianca Elkington says iwi like Ngāti Toa are ready, but it will have to be well managed nationally.
If it's well managed, that means if you've got somebody at the other end of iwi who are aware of this, who will go, yeah, we'll help, but where's the pūtea for this? Because we don't have people sitting around on the marae waiting for a system to come up to what we've always known to be right. We don't have those people. We are now having to resource that work.
But Brad Aotearoa from Ngāti Naho asks what other government contractors are expected to work only for occasional koha. He says more needs to be done to entrench the relationships for the benefits of both mana whenua and the increasing busloads of students arriving at Rangiriri Pā.
Now to Rakiura, Stewart Island, where the first day of a 2-day COVID vaccination clinic is underway. Locals were queuing before the clinic even opened its doors. Our reporter Timothy Brown and camera operator Nathan McKinnon have the story.
It took less than 2 hours for the team of 4 vaccinators to get the first dose into the arms of a quarter of the community on New Zealand's most southern island. There's barely more than 400 people who call the island home. But Community Board Chair John Spraggan says they're acutely aware of how important visitors are to their livelihood and the risk that presents. That's why for him, especially with his job with the local ferry, there was never any doubt about the need to get vaccinated.
It would be devastating here. We're a small, close-knit community. Everyone knows everyone. People mix, all the time. It would spread like wildfire.
Young and old alike came for the chance to get their first vaccine dose. 86-year-old Wendy Hallett, Rakiura's eldest kaumatua, went along to the clinic with her 2 daughters to get the shot. She says older generations still have memories of the polio epidemic, and that's incentive enough to protect herself against COVID.
People who refuse vaccinations are being selfish. Having been through the polio one, which was sort of just after the war, I think, and I couldn't start high school because everything was closed down. And I thought, well, maybe if they'd had vaccinations then, it wouldn't have got so big and affected so many people.
At the other end of the age spectrum is Skylar Mill. The 19-year-old says she wants to set an example for others her age, but also has personal reasons for taking up the opportunity.
Family is my main thing. I've got a sister with a disability, and so the opportunity came up and I came straight in just so I can be safe around her and my grandparents and everything. And I'm young. I don't see many other young ones in here at the moment. Don't know if they're all at work, but I'd like to be one to encourage other young ones to come down as well.
In the first hour, 66 people got their shot. And that's not including the 20 who were included in a wet run yesterday in preparation of the clinic. Nurse practitioner Nadine Goldsmith says the turnout is incredible and the clinic is meeting its goals.
As well as meeting the kaupapa, which is to safely vaccinate as many people as we can here on Rakiura, it's also an opportunity to give people a really positive health experience in their own space, and so that's an important part of this work as well, and I think we've achieved that.
None of those who spoke to Checkpoint had any doubts about getting their vaccine, and most described it as doing their part for the community they love. Henry Grayson says there's only one decision he spent any time deliberating on.
And I guess that brings us on to the most important question, what flavour lollipop?
Yeah, so I've gone with the green because it's all go here today on Stewart Island with the green lights, so that's why I've gone with this trusty colour here.
And what about the shot itself? Sue Ford isn't bothered.
When do I get the injection?
And the people of Rakiura generally agreed it's nothing to worry about.
Nothing at all. A scratch. We've got worse sandflies down here than that sort of thing, so no problems.
Absolutely a non-event. It was so easy. Didn't feel it.
I think a sandfly landing on my arm would have made it just as much of an impression as that did.
It would be a whole lot worse getting a fish hook in your hand.
The vaccinators will be on site until 7 o'clock this evening, before returning for day 2 at midday tomorrow. They'll be back in 3 weeks' time to offer second doses.
And if you were listening to that on radio, you can catch Timothy and Nathan's piece on our Facebook page. We'll put the video up. Man, they look like they had really good post-vaccination snacks, it has to be said. On the Wallabies, really strong opinions here. This person says it's a disgrace. There is absolutely no way a rugby game will bring that money in. It should not have got an exemption. Peter says the government has made a big mistake with the rugby exemption. The last time the NZR went against public opinion was the South Africa tour, says Peter. Another person says it's simply not good enough to bring in a rugby team when our border is closed. It's disgusting. Chris, on the other hand, has a different opinion. Says it's not just about money, it's about the well-being of everyone. And while not everybody loves sport, it is fair to say this fine nation appreciates our rivalry with the Australians on the rugby field. I find myself I'm an artist and I can really appreciate that, says Chris.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Aotearoa tēnei. The acting COVID-19 response minister has conceded it was a political decision to let the Australian men's rugby team come to New Zealand despite the Trans-Tasman bubble pause. The Wallabies have been granted an economic exemption so they can play the All Blacks in Auckland in 10 days' time. The government has said a single rugby test is worth between $17 and $20 million in spending for the host region. However, previous Bledisloe Cup hosts report takings of between $1 and $10 million. Interviewed by Checkpoint, Aisha Verrill defended the government's figures.
That are based on officials taking a diligent look at the data. But look, if there are concerns that they think that members of the public think our estimates are incorrect, I'd happily have another look at that.
New Zealand Rugby's Chief Executive Mark Robinson told Checkpoint no All Blacks players have yet been vaccinated against COVID-19. They are due to be offered the shots at the end of this week. Robinson said New Zealand Rugby's policy is for players to be vaccinated before travelling overseas for games. The Prime Minister has welcomed the news that an originally undersubscribed mass vaccination event has now been oversubscribed. Fewer than a quarter of the people initially invited booked for the Manukau event starting on Friday, and thousands more invitations had to be sent out more widely. Jacinda Ardern stressed today that the event is running as a trial.
Not everyone necessarily is going to respond to something they receive through their mailbox. We are thinking about different ways that we can communicate a mass vaccination event, but the important thing is we're now a little oversubscribed for the event, which was intentional.
Jacinda Ardern herself got her second dose of the Pfizer vaccine today, 1 day shy of 6 weeks since her first dose, in line with Health Ministry recommendations. The Chief Ombudsman says the Ministry of Health is failing services for people with intellectual disability in supervised care. Findings from an investigation released today detail oversights by the Ministry in its high and complex framework. That's a network of care services predominantly for people going through the criminal justice system. Peter Bosher says some people are spending longer in prison while waiting for a hospital placement, and some experiences are traumatising for those in care. The ministry says it accepts the findings. The World Health Organization is calling for tougher regulation of e-cigarettes. It says they're dangerous for people's health and a gateway to tobacco for younger people. More on this from the BBC's Imogen Folks.
Today's report suggests those who use e-cigarettes are 3 times more likely to use tobacco products in the future. The WHO is calling for strict regulation of e-cigarettes in a bid to prevent young non-smokers starting to use them. Smoking should not be renormalised, the organisation says, just as controls on traditional tobacco are beginning to show positive results on health. Nevertheless, 1 billion people around the world still smoke, and tobacco is estimated to cause 8 million deaths a year.
Greenpeace is calling for cuts to the amount of polluting nitrate allowed in drinking water. The Canterbury Regional Council's release of its annual water quality survey shows half of the wells in the region have increased nitrate levels over the last decade. Of the 322 wells tested, only 20 exceeded World Health Organisation levels. However, Greenpeace says the bar has been set too low, as studies show an increased risk of premature births at half the level allowed by the WHO. It says there is also a link between bowel cancer at a fraction of the current standard. It's coming up to 4 minutes past 6. The New Zealand men's sevens team will play for gold tonight at the Tokyo Olympics. This afternoon they beat Great Britain 29-7 to set up a final against Fiji. Clay Wilson is in Tokyo.
The New Zealand men's side were too good for Great Britain in the semi-finals on another hot and humid day in the Japanese capital. New Zealand led 14-7 at half-time before pulling away further with a strong second-half performance. The second semi-final was a closer contest. Argentina led Fiji 14-12 at the half-time break, but the class of the powerful Fijian side shone through in the second half as they claimed a 26-14 win. The results mean at least a silver medal is guaranteed for New Zealand, who finished a disappointing 5th at the 2016 Olympics in Rio. Tonight's final will be at 9 o'clock.
Rowers Grace Prendergast and Kerry Gala will go into tomorrow's final of the women's pair as favourites, having set a world best time in their semi-final win. They'll be chasing New Zealand's second rowing medal of the Games because Brooke Donoghue and Hannah Osborne won silver in the double scull this afternoon. The Ollie Whites will be without their captain and most experienced defender, Winston Reid, for their crunch final pool match against Romania tonight. New Zealand need to win to be assured of a quarter-finals berth. And New Zealand cyclists George Bennett and Patrick Bevan will contest the time trial tonight, with Bevan an outside medal chance. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, David Cohen's conversations with former Prime Minister Jim Bolger is the Hump Prize. Nick Tipping presents the Kiwi Big Band edition of Inside Out. And we've got not one but 2 bands in the studio for a sofa session. Odessa, the Richter City Rebels, and vocalist Mariah Ramis. Join me, Brian Crump, afternoon news at 7 on RNZ National.
The short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland, scattered showers easing for a time tonight and tomorrow morning. Auckland to Kapiti Coast, including Coromandel Peninsula and Central High Country, mainly fine, isolated showers in the west. Bay of Plenty, Gisborne to Wellington and Wairarapa, fine, some cloudy periods. Nelson and Marlborough, excluding the Kaikoura Coast, mainly fine, cloud and a few showers tomorrow evening. For the Kaikoura Coast and Canterbury, fine, some cloudy periods. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, cloudy periods and a few showers. Otago and Southland, fine with the odd afternoon shower today, high cloud tomorrow. Chatham Islands, cloudy with occasional showers. RNZ National, it's coming up to 7 minutes past 6.
Kia ora rā e ho, no mai, hoki mai. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. What kind of wheels do you drive? And my next question is, are they still parked where you left them? Police have crunched the numbers for stolen cars in Tamaki Makaurau in the past year, and there's a pattern. Here's Inspector Trevor Beggs with the car thieves shopping list.
In the Auckland region, Tamaki Makaurau, in the last 12 months, we've had 9,500 vehicles stolen. The most commonly stolen vehicle models during that time were, number 1, the Mazda Demio, and that was 825 stolen. Second up was the Nissan Tida at 777 stolen. And rounding out the top 5 were the Mazda Atenza 364 taken, Subaru Legacy 304 taken, and Subaru Impreza 243 taken. So, unfortunately, that's the list of the top 5 this year.
So why are they so popular with thieves?
I think there's a belief out there amongst the offenders that some of these are easier to steal than others. Also, we note that a lot of the imported second-hand vehicles don't always come with factory-fitted immobilisers, which makes them a preferred target for these offenders.
So you said about 9,500 vehicles in the last year pinched from Tamaki Makaurau. As a collective, this top list of the most popular stolen cars, what percentage of the total do they make up?
So these 5 models make up over 25% of all the stolen vehicles across Tamaki Makaurau in the last year.
Right, so owners, while they might want to pop out during this interview to check that their baby is where they parked it, but before they do that, can you give us some how-tos for keeping their vehicles safe? What can they do?
Great. So it's pretty straightforward. I mean, a visible deterrent like a security lock or a steering lock on your wheel is a great visible deterrent. Apart from that, an immobiliser is very effective, especially if it's in a secret place that only you know. Also, if you're going to park it on the street, if you're not lucky enough to have a driveway or a garage to put it in a well-lit place. And somewhere that can be seen, maybe from a neighbour's property. Don't leave any valuables in your car, of course, because that's just an incentive to break in. And if you can afford it, get a car alarm installed. They're very effective to bring attention to it.
Where are these cars generally going missing from?
Oh, all over, literally all over. From people parking in the CBD overnight to right across all the suburbs in Auckland. So it's not an isolated thing.
So besides those security things, right, that might make the vehicles more vulnerable, is there something about, do explain this to me if there is, the Mazda Demio and the Nissan Tiida that a thief would want that car?
Look, it's hard to explain because they're not what you would see as flash or desirable vehicles. I've had a discussion today with somebody who tells me that the Mazda Demio is the first vehicle that you get assigned to you in a PlayStation game called Gran Turismo, and that's quite popular. It's the first vehicle you get assigned in that game, and then there may be a link to that. Unsubstantiated, but just interesting to note.
Very interesting, Inspector, because that then makes me wonder, if people are stealing Mazda Demios and they are popular in this game, what is happening to the cars once they get pinched?
A significant number are recovered. So, about 7,000 of those vehicles are eventually recovered. And a lot of them were reported stolen from places like shopping centres and car parks. So it may often be somebody just jumping into the vehicle and taking it from one place to another and abandoning it. Also, though, unfortunately, a lot of these vehicles are used in further crime, causing harm in the community. And I think that might, going back to your other point, Lisa, that could be a link around Demio and Tiida are seen as quite low-key vehicles that wouldn't attract a lot of attention. And maybe there's a perception that offenders feel they can go around blending in if they're using these vehicles. Hard to tell.
Inspector, besides a Skoda, what do you drive?
Personally, I drive a very low-key, generic imported vehicle.
Right, so you're not in the top 5 then?
No, definitely not.
And that was Inspector Trevor Beggs. The final phase of the mass vaccine rollout has begun, with over 60s getting the call to be immunised against COVID-19. The rollout for Group 4 will be staggered by age, with by text or email invitations sent to book a time slot. Just under 700,000 people are now fully vaccinated, which the Prime Minister says is a good start. Anai te kai ripoata, Amy Williams.
Any nerves? No. The nurse says she has plenty. A lollipop bag and a sticker. How was it? Thank you so much. Just fine. Really, really easy.
Some nerves for the nurse giving the Prime Minister her second COVID vaccine today. Jacinda Ardern adding to the number of fully vaccinated New Zealanders as the rollout moves into its next stage. From today, anyone aged over 60 can book an appointment to get their first dose, either online or by calling an 0800 number.
Kia ora, and welcome to the COVID vaccination health line. Please stay on the line, and our team will be with you as soon as possible.
By midday, more than 15,000 bookings had been made. Jacinda Ardern says there are now more than 800,000 people booked to have the vaccine.
70% of all New Zealanders aged over 65 have either already been vaccinated or are now scheduled to be. And so, it is time to start moving to our next group of eligible people for vaccination to keep up the momentum of our vaccine rollout.
1.7 million doses of the COVID-19 vaccine have now been administered, but many over 65s have still not been vaccinated, but they can call to make appointments. Those under 60 are also trying their luck. RNZ's heard from a handful of people who have walked into vaccination centres and received their first dose despite not being in an eligible group. Immigration Advisory Centre Medical Advisor Peter McIntyre says a high vaccination rate is the best defence against the virus.
From the virus's point of view, everything's going well, and until you've got high vaccination rates, you're simply not protected against that.
He says under 30s will be the hardest to convince to get vaccinated because they tend to minimise the risk of contracting the virus. The small number of bookings among MIT students for the first mass vaccination event in Auckland this weekend has concerned health officials and local leaders. Jacinda Ardern says the event is running as a trial.
Not everyone necessarily is going to respond to something they receive through their mailbox. We are thinking about different ways that we can communicate a mass vaccination event, but the important thing is we're now a little oversubscribed for the event, which was intentional.
Looking ahead, Director General of Health Ashley Bloomfield says authorities will keep track of who's had the vaccine to ensure those who've not have every opportunity to take up the offer.
What's critical now is that we know exactly who and who hasn't been vaccinated in each DHB area at local level and by ethnicity and by age group, exactly how many people are in each group and exactly how many have been vaccinated.
And vaccine stock is looking flush. Another 350,000 doses landed in the country yesterday, bringing the total doses delivered this month to 1 million.
It's 6:15 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Some Fiordland businesses are calling a new vision for Milford Sound a game changer. The Milford Opportunities Master Plan suggests charging foreigners an access fee, banning cruise ships and a new park and ride scheme. Visitor numbers in Aotearoa more than doubled in the 6 years to 2019, putting pressure on the iconic region. Reporter Tess Brunton was at the launch.
Before COVID-19, Muriel Johnstone from Oraka Aparima says Aotearoa wasn't the same experience.
It's true, we got to the stage as iwi, as mana whenua, where we were embarrassed going into our most treasured place because we were telling people about the things that they would see when they looked at the beautiful postcards. And when we took them there by road, it just wasn't there anymore. We were, as they said, losing the essence of our own places.
She says the master plan is the answer mana whenua had been looking for. It recommends international visitors either pay for a parking permit or use a zero-carbon hop-on, hop-off park and ride system to get to Milford Sound. New Zealanders won't need to pay to access Aotearoa, but parking will be limited. Project Governance Group Chair Dr. Keith Turner says it's a precedent-setting piece of work that started back in 2017.
The reason that this will be successful is there's been so much stakeholder engagement. There's such a widespread willingness to see change, such a determination to see change.
Tiano would be developed into a hub to encourage more people to stay. Buildings would be revamped and more visitor activities, conservation and cultural experiences established. The more controversial ideas include banning cruise ships from the inner sound and closing the airstrip. Dr. Turner says it would cost roughly $25 million to repair the airstrip. Already there has been pushback from the industry, but he says they can't please everyone.
Look, they only can land about 150 days a year at Milford. When they can't land, they fly over, and I think that's a very feasible option for them. They've actually told us their passengers are blown away by the flight over the Alps. more so than the landing at Milford.
Chris Adams from Fuel Than Jet is excited by the plan.
It's a very bold plan and big changes going to be made. I'm wishing them well. Just hope that they support the little operators and it doesn't become one or two big operators are all that is left in Milford Sound. But for Te Anau, it could be a game changer.
He's keen to see more people in town.
Well, people are going to be coming to Te Anau and staying rather than just bussing for that terrible trip from Queenstown to Milford and back. Now they're going to come and stay in Te Anau, eat at our restaurants, use our activities, come to places like Fiordland Jet for a trip before they leave again. And part of the plan is that they're wanting to grow Te Anau, even wanting more stuff on the lakefront to happen.
Sandfly Cafe owner Carolyn Fox is pleased to hear less traffic will be travelling on the Milford corridor.
Safety is obviously the biggest thing with a lot of people. A lot of tourists don't realise how dangerous that road is. So obviously if it's safer for all of us to be in our cars driving, then that's a bonus.
The project's received $15 million from the government to help get it off the ground and for upcoming business cases. Southern District Mayor Gary Tong knows people want action.
As the cat's out of the bag, the secret's out, so to speak, and it's time to move forward, and that is what I've heard through the question and answer session afterwards. Don't let it sit on the shelf, Gary. Get it out there, get it done.
He acknowledges the plan won't suit some, but says there will be plenty of consultation.
And some breaking news now, and if you're watching, we've got some pictures. There is a large industrial fire. It is near Te Rako Drive, Botany, which is in Auckland. There are 14 fire appliances that are battling the fire. And, wow, from the pictures, it is clouds of black smoke billowing above the road there, and it is causing traffic build-up. Police are asking people to stay away. As we said, 14 fire appliances there at the scene. Fire is said to be over about 240 square metres, and it is not yet under control. Plenty of black smoke billowing there, and pictures show a number of fire appliances. We believe there to be about 14 there, with fire officers working to try and get this under control. Again, traffic is building up in the area and police are asking you to stay away if you don't need to be around there. Just over 20 years ago, at the end of the 90s, a generation of Pacifica dragged the memory of the Dawn raids from under the rug. Pacific creativity broke out into a hive of popularity, declaring an end to national amnesia on the racist immigration policy. And now those behind some of Aotearoa's first art and entertainment inspired by the Dawn raids are reflecting as the government prepares to say sorry. RNZ Pacific reporter Marina Whangaiawa Muller reports.
From the recording studio to fashion runway, Pacifica were for the first time speaking out on how the government traumatised communities by invading their homes in the early morning. We now know Oscar Keightley is a jack of many trades, but it was in 1997 that he launched the Dawn Raids production as a young playwright. He says the time was a coming of age.
It was weird that it just wasn't a thing. It was almost like something that was in the national amnesia and best left there, and I think our community was quite happy to not talk about it because it was so awful.
In 1995, Keightley was cast in the play Tsatsau Rites of Passage. That play, looking at the effects of immigration, began with real tattooing, live on stage, demonstrating Samoan pe'a.
The kind of period piece that went from the 40s to the 80s, and it was pretty full on at times. And I remember the reporter saying, "Oh, can't you guys make happy stories?" In a kind of flippant, casual way, but it was just that attitude of, why do you guys need to talk about this stuff?
Rapper Bill Urale, better known as King Kapisi, began his career around the same period. He's performed alongside big names including Janet Jackson, the Beastie Boys and Red Hot Chili Peppers. And it's on the stage at sold-out venues across the world that King Kapisi referenced the Dawn Raids in his lyricism.
For some reason, I thought I was Māori. And the reason why that was because I had never understood what the word Samoa was. Samoa, we spoke Samoan at home, but until I touched, the motherland and was able to say, wow, there's heaps of Samoans over here.
KBC's critically acclaimed debut album in 2000 was Savage Thoughts, with titles such as Home Invasion and Fix Amnesia. In 2002, he founded streetwear label The Overstayer Clothing Company. His garments sold in farmers and appeared on the catwalks of Westfield-styled Pasifika and New Zealand Fashion Week.
Whatever you create, it represents where you're from, your family, but also your lineage. And, that's what I've tried to do with my music. We've made some iconic songs. And the cool thing is about right now, we still have the potential to make other iconic songs.
When Dawn Raid Entertainment was at its peak, it was home to some of the best-selling Pasifika artists of all time. Mulianga Tele Danny Leao Savai was one of its founders. Also known as Brother D, he named his label Dawn Raid because he himself was raided.
I went through it, and the dogs, the early hours in the morning with the police, banging the house down and taking away my cousin, and all those things happened. And I remember I asked my mum at the time, what had happened, and she just said, he's just been here too long.
The Dawn Raids may have ended several decades ago, but the way in which Pasifika are viewed in the national psyche is damaged to this day. But Brother D counts himself in a crowd that flipped negative stereotypes on their head.
The one beautiful thing for me in the journey of Dawn Raid was these billboard magazines with the word Dawn Raid in it. Once our music was in the billboard, once again, to me, there you go. That's my struggle, that's my fight, that's everything that I believe in.
There are some that still seek an outlet to vent their unresolved trauma. For the past 2 weeks at the Abuse and Care Tatala e Pulonga inquiry, stories continue to expose the Dawn Raid's devastating and ongoing impact. Oscar Kitely says Sunday's formal government apology will provide a chance for all to look at where we came from and where to move forward.
The powers that be have to be prepared to engage meaningfully for that apology to mean anything. But it's still important, and I don't want to go past this point. I think this is important, rather than go to but what about this and this needs to happen? Of course, absolutely. Time and place for all that to come out. But I don't want to go past this point.
Greater Sydney will stay in lockdown for another 4 weeks. The state has yet to get a grip on the growing number of Delta variant cases, recording another 177 locally acquired cases today. World Watch's Polina Lau reports.
Sydney's COVID crisis still not under control. It means another month of restrictions for 5 million people. What began as a 2-week lockdown on June the 26th will now stretch to August the 28th. New South Wales State Premier Gladys Berejiklian says case numbers meant restrictions couldn't lift.
It would have not been possible for us to come out of lockdown tomorrow or Friday. And given also the health advice about where the situation is, it would have also not been realistic for the New South Wales government to make a decision about the next 2 weeks. For that reason, Greater Sydney will be in lockdown for a further 4 weeks.
Alongside workplaces, household mixing continues to be the biggest problem.
Just to bring home that you might think you're doing your grandmother or your aunt a favour by dropping in and giving them food or going in to say hello, but that could be their death sentence. Do not do it.
But some rules are changing. Residents can now only travel 10 kilometres for shopping and only for essential items. Some construction sites can operate again, but it's still banned in 8 areas of the city. And people living by themselves will be allowed to nominate one person to visit them over the next 4 weeks. There's a change to the vaccine rollout too, with final year school students asked to get a shot.
If you want Year 12 face-to-face in those local government areas, they must get vaccinated, and that's why we're working hard to provide that in the next few weeks.
Pfizer vaccines will be redirected from the regions, but there's no update on whether teachers will be vaccinated. And with the death of a woman in her 90s last night, the Premier gave a further warning, not mincing her words.
Every time you step out the door, chances are you will be in close proximity to someone who has the virus or has a close contact who has the virus. That is just a fact. So be very deliberate every time you leave the house.
Prime Minister Scott Morrison made an announcement saying the federal government is ready to support the state.
The federal government has been working on a program of additional support that may have been required should Sydney have gone into a further lockdown. And we've worked together again to provide this increased support, that means that 460,000 companies and 3 million employees of those companies will be supported through this direct support.
While New South Wales plunges further into lockdown, Victorians are emerging from theirs. But restrictions will remain in place for another 2 weeks, including no visitors at home. Victoria's Chief Health Officer, Brett Sutton, had this message.
It's not over. There will be ongoing risks and there'll be ongoing potential for incursion into Victoria. So it is not like any of us need to let our guard down with respect to all of the things that we know we need to do.
The state recorded 9 new cases today. One is a traffic controller at a drive-through testing centre who worked 2 days while infectious. It's still unknown where he contracted the virus, and officials will be looking into whether any positive cases went through that testing site.
Just in breaking news, the American gymnast Simone Biles has withdrawn from all competition at the Tokyo 2020 Games. Now, she's won 30 Olympic and World Championship medals in her career and is reportedly the most decorated American gymnast in their history. Earlier, she withdrew from a team's event citing mental health issues, and she is now entirely out of the competition. Now, just to recap, there is also a fire burning in South Auckland, Terako Drive, and a warning there, stay out of the area if you possibly can. There are a number of fire trucks there, 14 on site, and there's a couple more on the way. The fire covers about 240 square metres, and it is causing some traffic delays and issues, so the police are asking you to stay away if possible. Not yet under control, and it's in an industrial building in that area, so do take care if you're out and about there. On the Wallabies, before we head off, a lot of feedback on this. Oh my God, we're talking about COVID on our doorstep. Who cares about rugby teams? Going to America is even worse, says this listener. Someone else says more rugby players going to be allowed into New Zealand, economic benefit. What about farm workers that are needed? Maybe the farm workers should form a rugby team to get entry, then go and do farm work after a game. Surely productive workers are just as, if not more important. We're almost out of time, but ko te kaupapa tuatahi o pōpō on First Up from 5 o'clock tomorrow morning. Reaction from friends and whānau as Fiji faces off against New Zealand. Who will win the quest for Sevens gold? 9 p.m. tonight for the finals. Kia pai tōpō.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The acting COVID-19 response minister has defended the government's figures in deciding to let Australia's men's rugby team into New Zealand, despite the Trans-Tasman bubble pause. None of the All Blacks have yet been vaccinated against COVID-19, although they are expected to be offered shots this week. The Prime Minister says she's pleased the mass vaccination pilot in Auckland this weekend is now oversubscribed. 14 fire appliances are battling to bring a large industrial fire in South East Auckland under control. Those are the latest news headlines. Our next news and weather